us really is the hallmark of everything that we do at Mind Movement. So it's a really, it's more than just, a word that means meditation or a word that is synonymous with being aware. For us, it really sort of threads into the solution to every mental health problem, every physical health problem. And so what we've done is we've taken this very simple definition of mindfulness, which is to be present or on purpose, to be present on purpose, to give your attention to the here and now on purpose and non-judgmentally. Those are the key and critical basic defining features of that word. But we have taken those concepts and expanded that definition into these three components. So the first is this idea of awareness. And the second is this idea of alignment. And the third is this idea of allowing. So for now, we're just staying on awareness. And most people have a sense of what awareness means. But at Mind Movement, everything is about change. I realize my video isn't up. So sorry, hold on one second. At Mind Movement, everything is about change, right? So new share, there it is. Now you can probably see my screen, and I apologize for that. So everything we do comes down to ultimately helping people achieve whatever objectives they have for themselves in their lives. Now, obviously, with a background in mental health, we're usually talking about this in the context of things like depression, anxiety, even psychotic disorders, substance use disorders. So we're usually talking about it in that context, but this can also be applied to anything. So if I want to make more money, or if I'm unhappy in my relationships, or if actually, frankly, I don't know what the hell I want. I have no idea what direction I want my life to go in. And I want to figure that out. Certainly, that's actually the question that I had when I started out years ago in trying to use this mindfulness stuff in a productive way. That was my question. My question was, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And I felt very stuck. And that's all I wanted. It's all I wanted to know. So it doesn't matter what you apply, what we're going to talk about to, it has the same outcome in every context. And that ultimately is guiding you towards whatever your version of your authentic self, the happy you, the you that you ultimately want to be or hope to be. That's really what this is all about. And it might not look the way you think it will, and that's okay. So often this is about letting go of whatever you expect that to be so that you can go through the process of arriving at wherever it is that ends up being. So first and foremost, before we get into anything else, I like to start out when I talk about this idea of mindfulness with the practice, because we can know all there is to know. We can be very heady and intellectual about this idea, but if we can't practice it in the here and now, it's all useless. This information does nothing if we can't actually integrate it into our way of being. So the first thing that I like to talk about is being present. And so present with me right now, what does that mean? It means giving me your attention. And I know that's hard, believe me. Nobody knows better than me. I can be extremely ADHD, trying to look at text messages and, put together a presentation and talk to my daughter and have a phone conversation. And so I know how it is, how difficult it can be to give one thing your full attention, but this is the practice. The second piece to that is, how am I paying attention? Oftentimes, and we're going to talk about this a lot today, we're either in the past or the future, or the third option, we think we're in the here and now, but actually we're splitting our attention between being present and narrating. So having this other, almost like external voice, that's our voice, that's watching us, It's watching us, or it's watching whatever I'm looking at. And it's like evaluating, like judging. If I'm in a classroom, I'm judging the professor, or I'm judging my classmates, or I'm judging me, or I'm, thinking, oh my God, did somebody just notice that I made this weird sound? Whatever it is, the idea being that we're splitting our attention between being entirely engaged in the moment and watching ourselves in the moment. And that is not present. So that's something different. But that's critical information. So awareness is exactly that. It's information. And no change, no effective change is ever coming unless we have awareness. That's why it's the first conversation we have. Because if I'm gonna, whether my objective is relieve stress, whether my objective is learn how to meditate, or my objective is much larger to, you know, figure out what I want to do with my life, or have a relationship, or make lots of money, whatever it is, none of that is coming until I understand me. And not in that heady psychodynamic way. So not in that way that we tend to love, which is like going back through every moment of our past and picking out why we're so screwed up. That's not what I mean. What I mean is being able to hear my thoughts right now and go, oh my God, I hear myself. I'm replaying that incident again. Why am I doing that? I need to stop doing that. Let me bring my attention back to the moment. So really just trying to undo a lot of really just habits. It's all they are. They're just automatic ways that we've picked up living in the world. A lot of it's been taught to us. So in order to undo that, we've got to start to be able to hear what's going on here. And so that's the last thing that I ask you to think about today is, while you're listening to me, what am I thinking about? Am I completely engaged, or am I in my head? And if I am, what's happening there? And as you get more and more skilled at that, things can start to really change in a magical way for you. So the other thing is remembering always, 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 can you have a spirit of curiosity with all of this? Can this be fun and playful for you? Can it be silly? Can you enjoy the process instead of being what we typically have been trained to be, which is critical and like oppressive? We will talk about that voice too. But so rather than being, in that really critical voice, or in our negative self voice, can we just kind of like be curious and go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I'm learning something about myself. So, and thinking about this always, that's what this is. This is a process of learning, and it's a process of empowerment, which is really important to also understand. If I'm never responsible for anything in my life, then I never have any power to change any of it. And while we're not to blame for how things have happened, we have to start to see how we might be contributing if we really want that power to begin to really manipulate the world around us in the way we want to see, in for it to actually start to reflect how we want it to be. So what I want to talk about today, so last time we went over the two basic reasons that we use meditation at Mind Movement. There's hundreds of millions of reasons why someone should use meditation, right? I mean, people use it because they feel better. They use it because it brings them wisdom, enlightenment. If you're, in the Buddhist tradition, you're doing it for enlightenment, doing it to, potentially for your next life, whatever it is. Here we use it really for very specific reasons because of what the modality itself achieves. So first and foremost, and again, remember this is about awareness, meditation is the tool that puts space between me, this voice, and me, the intuitive me, the me that I can lose sight of very quickly when I'm trying to keep up, when I'm trying to achieve, when I'm comparing myself to my peers who are my age, where they are, how I'm doing in comparison to them. Whenever I am in it's really your prefrontal cortex voice, but whenever I'm in that big heady voice that we've been really trained to be in all the time, that's not really us. That's that big heady voice we've been trained to be in all the time. But you actually exist in a much more in a much more intuitive place. And when you allow yourself to start to cultivate listening to the you that's kind of behind or underneath all of that crazy, you can start to hear yourself in a much different way. But the reason that we don't hear that, and so many of us have lost touch with our intuitive self, is because of that noise that engagement, that constant, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then this and this and that. What about that? Just that constant, and we'll talk a lot about it. The reason that we get like that is because we've sort of been taught that our power, and you have to sort of bear with me on this, our power lies in our ability to manipulate physical things, people, places, and things. So we've been taught that my only way to be happy is to manipulate my environment to make me happy. So if I hate my job, I'm screwed because I hate my job. If my partner does something really agitating, then I have no choice but to be aggravated. If I don't like my apartment because it's too small, then I need a bigger apartment. So in other words, we've been really fed and force fed in every way. It's written into the Declaration of Independence that the way to happiness is by manipulating stuff, by manipulating people, places, and things. Tragically, because no one's ever taught us anything else, we just sort of kind of fall into that belief system and we don't even know we have. So what we end up doing is always trying to use our environment to manage our inner experience, to feel better. So people turn to everything. We turn to relationships, food, sex, drugs and alcohol, TV, Netflix, social media. And none of that is bad. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that it's bad to engage in those things. It's just that when you're doing it because you don't have the internal resources to do it within, that's where we get into trouble. So when you start to realize that when I put space between the real me and this crazy me, now I can slow way down and I can hear myself. And now I can start to manage my inner experience. So there's time and space between whatever's happening in front of me and how I want to react to it. So if my partner says something, insensitive or does something that's really aggravating, I have the space to go, oh, it's not about me. He obviously had a bad day. He's being a jerk, not my problem. I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing. So, but if we're in our reactive mode because we're not in touch with that, we think immediately, we don't think, we just react, or we think it's about us. We act from a place of insecurity. Now, today we're going to talk about the 10, we're not going to get into all 10, but we're going to talk about what we refer to as the 10 thought disturbances. These are the chronic patterns that live in this prefrontal cortex that are basically in all of us, but to varying degrees. And if you have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, these will be very familiar to you because you'll, in all likelihood, you'll have them at a higher level, but they are in everybody. And in fact, anxiety is in everybody. It is a part of how we were built. And depression is it's the wave of our culture. We were born into a negativity bias. And so these are really, oddly, these are normal emotions, and especially circa 2020. So we're going to get into starting again when we use things like mindfulness and meditation to slow way down. Now I can hear these patterns, the patterns we're going to talk about today. Once I can hear them and identify them, now I'm in the driver's seat because now I can make a conscious decision to make a different choice in my mind. And then the second reason that we use meditation is because it's the fastest way to neutralize unwanted negative emotion. So what does that mean, unwanted negative emotion? It means if I am tired of thinking about my ex-boyfriend and thinking about how he hurt me, and I don't want to think about that anymore, and I really want to let that go, and I feel that tugging on my heart because I can't seem to let it go, meditation is going to neutralize that. That's what it does. In fact, I've been in in a full re-traumatization, which is a long story, but re-trauma, in other words, an unexpected thing played out and I just reacted, and it was this really big sort of freak out that I didn't expect having, and it was in a work setting. So I quietly removed myself from that meeting space, went into my office, locked the door, and started just listening to a gong sound. 40 minutes later, I got up and I forgot why I forgot what had happened. And it really took me time. I was like, oh, why did I do this to begin with? Couldn't remember it. And 40 minutes before, it really felt like, an enormous deal, not just like a small, big deal, but like an enormous deal. So it really neutralizes negative emotion. And that's what we use it for. And once you understand, and again, these are huge concepts I'm throwing a ton at you, but once you understand that your thoughts are mood dependent, the nature of your thoughts at any given moment are going to be dependent on how you feel, it starts really quickly to become imperative that you are aware of your emotional states and that you're doing whatever you can to experience them, learn from them, and move through them if they're those unwanted negative states. So, because, in our culture, we've been taught that in order to heal, we must be in pain. And unfortunately, that's not actually true. In order to heal, we maybe have to look at something, but we can heal. We can start that healing process of creating whole new wiring systems in the mind and body without having to be in massive pain. So, in fact, it's harder sometimes for me to heal when I'm in that massive pain because I can get stuck there very quickly. And so oftentimes, if you're working with me, say, as your support through a change experience, the first thing we do, we don't go back first. The first thing we do is we give you all the tools, teach you how to practice these principles so that when it is time to go back and into those more painful experiences and to do the EMDR and to really like go into the unconscious and work through these things, you have the resources and tools to move through it and to learn from it and grow from it. So, okay. So last time, I also just want to mention that I brought up these basic practices. These things are all on the website too. And so definitely, mantras, affirmations, keeping a mindfulness journal, learning, if you don't know it already, the basic mindfulness of breath exercise. These are all, we went through the colors exercise, what grounding exercises mean, even something that may seem benign, like hot and cold in the shower. If let's say again, using heartbreak, if I'm in immense pain, one thing that I know now to do, I can jump in the shower or take a really warm salt bath. Do these things that are going to change my physiology to change my inner experience. And these things have this wonderful relationship where I can change my thoughts and my body changes, but I can change my body to shift my thinking. And unfortunately, we don't use that one nearly as much as we could. So, and my favorite one I mentioned, it's not here yet. Okay, so my favorite one that I mentioned already, the sound bath. So if you're not familiar with what that is, one of my favorite gong sounds from YouTube. It's free. It's on YouTube. You can find it also on the website. I love nothing more than to just listen to the gong for 20 minutes. It takes some getting used to. The gong can be a little dark when you're not, kind of used to it, but it's also just so relaxing. And just, again, it's just meditative, and it's the best time out once you get used to it in the middle of your day. And then the other one I brought up that I mentioned right at the end, but I want to bring back because it's also a wonderful exercise, is the love letter to yourself. So there is, again, this is also on the website. It's just somebody speaking in the first person over over music. And it's like, I love me. Basically, it's you talking to you. It's, you can listen to hers, use the one that's there. You can make your own. And if it's too much too soon to hear that stuff, if you're just not ready to say, I love you to yourself, that's okay too. Start with a basic affirmation. When I started out in all of this, when I tell you that, I was a maniac. This is before really YouTube was what it is now. I would make my own audio tapes, and it would be like, I love, approve, and accept myself. And I would say it over and over again, as many times as I could stand to. And then I would loop it somehow. I forgot how, some cheap editing software. And then I would listen to it while I slept, because my self-concept was so negative. I was so filled with so much self-loathing and just such a horrible sense of self-worth that I was willing to basically do anything. And so I clung to those sleep tapes. I would do letters. And yeah, I would probably cry a lot in the mirror saying nice things to myself because it didn't feel good at first. Like, it felt good, but it also felt hard. But whatever, I wanted to feel better and I was willing to do the work. So this stuff, and also, all works. And it all works. I know it works because I've used them all. So they all work and they're all worth your time and effort. So I want to start talking about thought disturbances, because these are big. Okay. So there are 10 identified thought disturbances. We have more, but I like these 10 because once you are aware of these patterns, it's enough to work with to start to really, I don't want to right the ship, improve your life, feel 1,000 times better, find yourself, find your path, whatever you want to say, fill in the blanks wherever for you. But these are the ones. At least that's what I found. And they are in a very specific order. So they're in the order that, as your support, I would tackle them with you. So they're designed to kind of like build on each other for you to be able to see what's going on. So it's all about awareness. Remember, this whole conversation falls under that big title of awareness. So the first one is past and future thinking. I'm not even going to bother with any other word on this slide that you can see, if you can see the slides, because we're not there yet. So past and future thinking, super, super obvious in a way. So I know for me, I think I was about 25 years old before I realized that I was always flip-flopping in every single moment between a thought of the past or a thought of the future. So it would be something like, okay, well, what am I going to eat later? Do I have the money to eat later? Well, what did I eat yesterday? Well, 2 months ago, I ate this much. And did I lose weight or did I gain weight, or should I eat that or should I not eat that? Well, today, tonight, in other words, just constantly flip-flopping between what was, what I think will be. And when you actually slow down enough to see that happening, it's insanity. I mean, it's insanity. It really, and I remember the day when I saw it in myself. And I mean, it was like, oh my God, it was like somebody else stopped me and showed me a mirror in this second. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I am a psychopath. I'm running down the streets of New York City with my teeth clenched, coming home from work, walking home, so angry with like fire coming out of my mouth because somebody is walking slowly in front of me. Like, how dare you walk slow in front of me? Seething with anger, my whole body tense. And I just saw it. It was like, I think even may have stopped dead in the sidewalk because I realized what was going on. And that was the moment where I realized that I needed to make a very serious change. So that doesn't have to be as dramatic for you. You don't have to have that kind of experience, but it's very logical. So why are we trapped in a past and future dichotomy? Well, if you went to school in any organized way in the United States of America, there's really no way not to, at least much of the time, be in a future orientation. Because from the moment that you arrive in any kind of school system, you're being told that what you're doing now is so that you can be ready for what you're doing in kindergarten is to prepare you for first grade. What you're doing in preschool is to prepare you for kindergarten. What you do in kindergarten is to prepare you for first grade. What you do in first grade is to prepare you for the tests in second grade. What you do in second grade, and then as you know, and we've all been there, as you go along, it's about getting good grades, to get good test scores, to get into a good college, to get a good job, to get a better job, to get married, to buy a house, to make more money, to get a fancy title, and just keep climbing. At a certain point, we just, without even knowing it, have adopted this achievement currency. People will say, oh, you Americans, you're materialistic and it's all about money. That's not actually true. I know a lot of very wealthy people. It's really not about money. It's really about achievement. It's about the stature, about the status, about that competitive component within us that makes us judge and evaluate ourselves against our competition, our peers. So we also are a culture that loves independence. We exalt it. Like, I can do everything on my own. And although that's a wonderful thing, it's actually quite counter to your intuitive instincts as a biological creature from a purely evolutionary standpoint, because we cannot exist independently of each other. All the psychological studies, for example, where I'm thinking of Jeannie in the 1970s, horrible situation, if you're not familiar, where this young girl was abused so badly from the time she was born. She was stuck in a closet, was not communicated with. And so they found her, I believe, I'm getting this maybe at 9 years old, they found her. And what they discovered was she lost the ability to learn language beyond what, a primate could. And the reason was because she had no human connection. There was no interaction with another human being. So not only that, the thing that actually, so there's two basic drives, first and foremost, in the biology, not in the spirit, but in the biology. In other words, not in the mind, but in the body. So the two basic drives for the body are survive. That's obvious. Don't get eaten by a tiger, survive, and connect. Because connection for 250,000 years meant survival. It meant survival, your survival, because if we're in a hunter and gatherer tribe, we need each other. Can't do it alone. But it also means survival of the species, passing along the genes. And so the two strongest, believe it or not, the drug combo in our natural neurochemistry is dopamine with oxytocin, which is the feeling that the mother gets flooded with the first moment she lays eyes on her baby. And that's designed so that we take care of each other, so that I make sure no matter what, I keep you safe. So these are all these evolutionary, we get flooded, and I'll never forget it. I have a 6-year-old. I'm not doing it again, but it was a trauma. Don't let anybody tell you that having a baby is not a trauma. It is. But the moment she came out, I'll never forget this, and I said it clear as day. This experience reminds me of when I was 13 and obsessed with a boy. Like it was like Penelope, Penelope, Penelope. Like, no, there was like her name drowned out every other thought in my mind. I was obsessed with her, just obsessed. Where is she? Where is she? Where is she? Okay, where is she? Where is she? And that's what it is. It's that flooding of dopamine and oxytocin that is the same as in love. So it actually turns out to be the almost identical to the feeling that we feel when we say we are in love with someone. And so this, by the way, is also the combo that puts us at high risk for addiction, because it's this really strong capability to love another person and to attach to somebody else that is the neurochemical system that gets hijacked from drugs and alcohol. So when you start to think about it, it's an important conversation in this framework, because we start looking at why are we doing what we're doing. So we are, again, exalted in this culture for independence. And so we start to buy into this concept that I'll be happy someday when I achieve all these markers, like when I get this and this, when I have all the friends, when I have the relationship, the boy or girlfriend or whatever, when I have the job. And I always joke, if I had, I remember probably being in like 8th grade and, praying to God, which I didn't believe in at the time, please God, if so-and-so just likes me back, I'll never ask for anything again. I remember saying that. Okay. So I think I probably moved through that relationship in a week. And certainly if that were true, wouldn't that be great if we could all just be satisfied with one more thing that we get? But it's just not how we're not built that way. That's not the human deal. We will never be satisfied with any next thing, because you as a human being are designed to keep creating. That's the deal. You're designed to keep generating something new. Oh, this sucked. I want this thing. Oh, well, I have this. So that's boring. Now I want something else. So getting stuff is never going to do it. It's never going to be what fulfills you. You can keep trying. Many of us do, and we'll never really ever be able to come to any other conclusion, but it can't just be about that. So that's sort of where this future that's part of where the future focus comes from. The other part is probably fairly obvious, and that's for our need for control. So we mistakenly think that if I can think through every possible configuration of what is going to happen at some time later, then I will be better prepared for that experience. So if I'm going to go to a party, if I can find out beforehand everybody that I think is going to be there, right, then I'll feel more comfortable going. Or if I have a wedding in 6 months, I better figure out what I'm going to wear now, because then I won't have to worry about what I'm going to wear later. I mean, the future focus is the voice of anxiety. So to just lay it out like it is, the future focus is the voice of anxiety. The past focus is really the voice of depression. The most tragic thing when I hear it from my clients, I get surprised, because this has left me so long ago that I even get surprised when I hear it come from somebody else, but I remember it. That's that I should have done something different. The regret, the voice of regret, the voice of looking back and saying, I did the wrong thing. I made the wrong choice. Or looking back and picking apart an interaction, a situation, a conversation, wishing I had said something differently, then thinking about how it might have played out if I had said something differently, and then feeling bad because I didn't. And, all of that, like picking apart the past, not in an effort to learn and grow, which is a different thing, but in an effort to really end up just making myself feel really bad right now. Well, why? Why would that make me feel bad right now? Well, I can't do anything about it anymore. It's over. I can't go back into the past and replay that conversation. I can't call that person from 10 years ago and say, hey, I'm sorry that I screwed up. I can't go back and go get a different degree from a different college, because now I realize, well, if I had actually paid the money for the better name on my degree, I might have gotten a job. You can't do that. You can't change what has already happened. But the key here is understanding that you have no power in the future either. That hasn't happened. The COVID-19, think about it from this perspective. Millions of us thought we knew what was coming. We thought we knew what the next 3 weeks in March were going to look like. We were planning, restaurants, planning how much to buy based on last year's numbers. projections, companies, every company in America looking at projections, looking at taxes and being ready to pay their tax, all of this in 2 weeks gone, shot to shit, the entire thing in a way nobody could have seen coming. And so we work ourselves up into a frantic, like just oftentimes we get so flipped out about what's going to happen. And the key there is understanding that what I'm doing when I get really worked up about something that hasn't happened right now, in this moment, I'm activating the fear response. And what that's doing, it's not only taking me out of the present. So where I have power, and the only place you will ever have any power ever to affect anything in a meaningful way is right now. That's it. You hear that. People say that. I remember hearing that like in some corny movie once, like something about you missing the moment if you're not in it. And I remember thinking that made sense. But this, there's no other place ever besides here. So when we spend here thinking about what has happened or what is going to maybe happen, we're not here. And that means that the place where you have power, you are not active, you are not engaged. And that's tragically where the vast majority of us spend almost all of our time. That then creates what we're going to talk about later, a victim position. And by victim, I mean a sense of power. I have no power. It's true. I don't have any power if my focus is always back there or ahead. And then people say, well, Sam, what about planning for the future? That's a different conversation. So constructive planning is not the same as in every moment obsessively trying to control the future by thinking through everything that could possibly happen in the future. So those are two different things. So really starting to, in an honest way, be able to slow down enough to hear, when am I in this past and future voice? Really, really important. The other thing is, when am I in, and we're going to get more into the narrative, to the narrator, when am I in, when do I think I'm present and listening, but I'm actually watching myself? So an example of that, if I am, maybe I'm on a date or I'm with a friend, and maybe there's like 3 of us and we're talking. And I saw this a lot working with young adults. I would see it a lot with the reason you'd see it a lot with young adults is because biologically before 40 years old, actually before 35, we're programmed to care a lot more about what our peers think about us. So there's a natural tendency to be focused on what other people think. And so it's very common when I was working with young adults to have them not present in the interaction with their friends, but evaluating what their friends might be thinking of something that they just said. And so again, you can't be engaged in the moment if you're assessing it in like a play-by-play kind of way. So this is marked by a lack of awareness of the present. I'm not paying attention to the here and now. Pattern is obviously replay something that has happened or to leap ahead something that might happen. This is very much about control. It's a false sense of certainty. It's also, we get stuck. This is habituated, and habits, we spend a great deal, probably, before, by the time you're 35, it's 98% of the time. So you can imagine it's still pretty high up until then, but that's a high number. So 98% of the time in a habit. In other words, whatever's playing out right now, instead of me consciously being deliberate about what I want to say or how I want to say it, I just react. And I react with what I've always done, with whatever reaction I've always had. So working with anxiety and depression, people don't necessarily love hearing this, but the truth is, all that really is are habits. They're just habits. Anxiety and depression are habits of thought and emotion. And habits are very serious because everything starts somewhere, right? Everything that we as human beings pick up started with something. And whether it's something that happens in middle school, whether it's your parents' divorce that happens whether you're 17 or 35, whether it's someone you love passing away, someone rejecting you, or just feeling ugly. I mean, it could be anything. If I wake up every day and I keep looking at that and I keep thinking about it and I keep connecting to that emotion and I keep thinking about it, and I keep looking at it and I keep connecting to that emotion, if you do that every day for 3 months, okay, now people are noticing we're pretty down. If you do that for 6 months, you have met criteria for depression, for major depressive disorder. And so you can imagine how many people might fall into that category without even really knowing it. So, but the thing is, we can get comfortable in not in negative emotion because it's what we know. And so when we start to try to move away from it, it can be very uncomfortable because happy is scary. What happens when we start to get happy? And this is one of the markers of depression. I start to think, what if I actually get happy and then it all falls apart? Then I'll be crushed. So I'd rather stay unhappy because what if? And again, remember, that's a future focus. So big part of this conversation, step one, learning to identify when I'm in the past or the future so that I can say, oh, I'm doing it again. How can I bring myself back to the here and now? And that's why we practice meditation, so that when it's time to do it on purpose, you can say, okay, time to bring it into the here and now. Lots of us, and if this is you, it's totally okay, because lots of us start out this way. We don't even know what it means to be present. We really don't. And that's okay. Again, because no one's taught us. So these are things that we really have to learn on our own. So how do I know when I'm present? Right? These are the kinds of things that I know I used to ask and drive my teachers crazy asking, I'm sure. And so you'll know, because at first it feels boring. At first, when you first sit down, you're like, this is kind of boring. I'm just looking at nothing. I'm just here. And so then of course we want to jump back. So it really just is a matter of starting where you're at and taking the baby steps. If that's something you identify with, start with guided meditation. That is it was my go-to in the beginning, because I felt like I was going on these little adventures and I enjoyed them. I found scripts I really liked. And so instead of just like listening to my breath, which I found difficult in the beginning, I would just, go find an adventure. There's millions all over the internet. Just Google, right? If you don't like one, don't listen. Try a different one, because we have that ability now. We have so much choice. But and the key with the guided meditation, allowing somebody else to take your attention. Like, that's what you're doing. You're just letting somebody guide your attention along with them. So most definitely, if you identify with a past and future thinking dichotomy, start meditating, even if it's just guided, even if it's just 2 minutes. Like, seriously, you put 2 minutes on your phone or on your alarm on your phone. That's okay, even if it's only just 2 minutes. So what are the signs and the symptoms? How do I know if I'm in this? Mood dysregulation, anxiety, worrying, fear, depression, talking a lot about the past, also identifying a lot with the past. We like this. It gives us a sense of comfort, especially when we're young. We've all done this. We kind of identify with a certain way of labeling ourselves. Maybe I'm an athlete, or maybe I don't know, I like a certain kind of music, or I was a dancer or I'm a gymnast, whatever it is. Here's the thing and the danger. There's comfort in that, but it's also weighing you in the past. So think about how your parents see you. Our parents see us as the infants that they held in their hands. You can be 70 years old, and if your parents are still living, you are the infant that they held in their hands. That's what you will always be. But that can be irritating when we're around our family because they still treat us like the person we were when we were 12. And we know we're not that way, but then we sort of feel compelled to behave that way because that's what they are asking from us. When you give yourself a label or when you identify strongly with your maybe trauma, pain, prior experiences, I know as a person who had a lot of heavy addiction and drug use for many years, that was my identity. I'm a drug addict, whatever that means. Or I had a lot of very scary, horrible things happen because of those years. And so I liked to wallow in the drama of the things that had happened, which again, that's fine. But what it did was, and I didn't know it at the time, it locked me into this story about who I was. And the danger is you can't be who you want to be because you are holding yourself where you were. And truly, the answer to that, the way to pivot is the present. Because this, again, if you stay with me for any length of time, you're going to hear this over and over again. It's all about being in the present because this is where your power is. It will never be anywhere but here. Change only happens one way. It only happens one way. You have to step into this moment, the here and the now, and make a different decision than you've ever made before. That is the only way that the body and mind starts to move in a different direction. And that's hard because how do I give myself something I don't have? How do I do something I've never done? Well, you just do it. But that's the only way we're going to get out. So the only way change is really coming is if we start to get into this moment and then say, okay, what am I going to do differently now? And that really means, what am I going to do with my attention that is different than what I've done in the past? So, being distracted. Oh, some other signs, this starting to move into some of the other thought disturbances, but being distractible, being unreliable. So if you're somebody who like makes plans with people, but you almost already know you're not going to show up before you even walk away from them, maybe it'll be like for next week or whatever. Or maybe you just cancel plans a lot and you're like that friend that everyone knows is probably not going to show up, like 50-50 shot, that kind of thing. That's a sign of past and future thinking. If you're someone who's in their head a lot, if there's a lot of drama, if there's a lot of emotion, and a feeling of powerlessness and vulnerability, almost like a feeling of shame, like I'm naked a lot when I'm out in the world. These are symptoms of past and future thinking. And as you get more comfortable with these ideas, it starts to make sense why all that stuff would be. So let me just show you. So I'm just going to show you what the solution is. So, and it's always helpful to have a solution because, great, Sam, you just told me what the problem is, but then you didn't give me a way out. So the way out here is really easy, or really simple, not easy. Sorry, here is presencing. So what does presencing mean? It's exactly what it sounds like it is. It's the action, the verb, the present tense of being in the moment. And so if you really feel like you're not willing to even try meditation or yoga, if not meditation, then movement, mindful movement, that is like, okay, that I'll settle for that. If you know you're not going to do any of those things, or including guided meditation or any of the other exercises, then you can try things like journaling in the morning. The morning, and we won't get into this now, but the morning is a very different time from a purely brain capacity and wavelength position. And so you have this access to, remember that what I was saying earlier about that deeper part of you, it's very active or clear. It's easier for you to hear in the morning. So even if you're just willing to take 2 minutes to like jot some things down, whatever comes to mind, you might find that you get a new idea maybe you've had a creative block. That would be the moment where it's gonna come, because we're just in a different brainwave frequency at that time of the day. So again, for even maybe the next couple of days, be thinking or noticing, am I in a past or future thought? And if I am, what does it feel like to bring myself back to the present? What does the present feel like? Because when you become aware in the moment of the past and the future, and then you say to yourself, all right, what does the present feel like? You get it. You get it right away because you can see it. You know what the difference is when you're actually in it in that moment. So practice that. That's what we call presencing. And really, again, this is all about awareness. So just practice hearing yourself in that non-judgmental, not in a non-critical way. Try to practice being in the moment. We have the best opportunity right now, stuck at home, to do this. I mean, the best ever. It's never going to happen again, and hopefully, but so it's an opportunity. And then also go back to, this slide is on the website, but I'll put it up again, to these practice basics. Go back to the colors exercise, the grounding, the ice or the showers exercise. Try the gong bath. Some of these other ones are maybe a little bit more advanced, but do the mindfulness or breath exercise again, or any of the beginner meditation things that are under COVID resources. Play around on the resources on the website, because all of it, every single thing there is designed exactly to help you with presencing. That's what it's all about. Does anybody have any questions? If you have questions and you're not able to send them to me now, you can always email them at info@mindmovement. You can also message them to me on Instagram or Facebook, wherever. And if I see them, I promise I will answer them. Otherwise, thank you guys for your attention. I so appreciate it. Stay safe, be well, and tomorrow night, if you're interested in addiction, big workshop tomorrow night on addiction, understanding addiction, what it all means. So definitely, if that's of interest to you, you won't want to miss it. Have a great night, you guys. Be well, stay safe.